Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. My name is Dr. Jacqui Schuman. I'm the Vice Chancellor and Director of Athletics and Recreation at UMASS-Boston. I am here today with Anthony Azama, who is the Associate Vice Chancellor and Director of Athletics at WashU. So nice to be here with you today, Anthony.
It's exciting. It's been a long time.
Yeah. When did we meet?
Vanderbilt. You was an athlete. I was an athlete. But I like to say we were scholars.
We were scholars.
Who happened to be
we are scholars.
athletes. That's right. That's right. Continuous learners.
Continuous learners. Yeah. So Anthony and I went to school together a few years ago at Vanderbilt, maybe more than a few years ago.
Yeah. A couple of decades.
You know, he was senior to me, which means he's more seasoned than me in life at this point.
That explains the gray hairs. Yeah.
And we were both student athletes there, and I think it's pretty awesome to be sitting here today with you, former student athletes and graduates of Vanderbilt University, and now both sitting in what they call the chair, leading athletic departments and sitting in senior leadership on university campuses.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
It's pretty cool, the fact that, we went through what we went through, highs and lows and all that good stuff. And something along that journey impacted us, and I think we would say the same name, Brad Bates, who was high in emotional intelligence and really connecting with student athletes to where we chose this to be our profession. And not only just to look at it as a job, but look at it as what can we leave? What legacy can we leave? What seeds can we plant in those people who work with us and the people we work for, which are student athletes. So I've always kind of followed your career from afar and kind of cheered you on when there was a release of you trying to do something different. I like to believe that a lot of those seeds were planted in both of us when we were at Vanderbilt.
Definitely. We didn't even plan to talk about Brad Bates together. Yeah. And Brad Bates was somebody who was so influential to me and still is. Yeah. And obviously you both worked together as well. So you had a great experience being able to learn from him actually, on the actual job. Brad was probably one of the friendliest faces to me in the Vanderbilt athletic department at the time. And I ran track and cross country, and we would run around campus all of the time. And who did I always see when I was running around campus? Brad Bates, one of our administrators. And anyway, he continues to be influential to me. And I would say is one of these people who, anytime I reach out to him, within, I think, 24 hours, he responds all the time. Yeah. And so you realize how somebody shows that care and the relationship is so meaningful and the influence is real and authentic and genuine. And so definitely something that was inspiring to me and continues to be. So, we've moved on from Vanderbilt to an extent. I know you were on campus this week to see, we have to plug the win over South Carolina the other day.
Correct.
I would like to hear a bit more about your success now and how you actually are able to build your blueprint for success. I know we talked about that as a topic that we would discuss today. I mean, for me, if I think of the blueprint of success, I'm thinking of the core components of how I actually approach success in our department, with our university, with our student athletes, important constituents. I'm curious as to what that means to you when you talk about blueprint of success.
Yeah, the heart of it has to start with the why, and when I think about my staff, we come from a lot of different places and we're bringing a lot of things to WashU. But I think the tie that binds is we really enjoy the development of young people. So for me, and kind of what I learned at Vanderbilt and carried through my career to now is, and I really believe this, and I think it was magnified during the pandemic. Passion does not run on fumes the way purpose does. And I'm really built around the purpose. And what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Which leads me to actions that are very intentional, which come from the heart, And I think with this job, I got to remember, and Peter Pilling told me this, he's like 90% of the job is great. 10% is going to challenge you on all fronts. Make sure you're visiting the 10% and you're living in the 90%. So if we can start from that base, it's all about alignment, assignment, before you can even talk about execution of strategies, 5-year plan, 3-year plan, 90-day plan, etc. Are we in alignment with the university? Meaning, are we bigger than a scoreboard? Scoreboard matters. They keep score in our profession. But at the same time, it's also about how are we impacting these young people that we're getting from all over the country in those 4 years so they set up for 40 years of success. And the beauty of sports, and I think we do it better than anybody on a college campus, we teach young people how to respond to failure. We teach them how to respond to failure. Doesn't matter whether they play or whether they're the best scout team player there is. It teaches you how to respond to failure. And I walked in that when I was at Vanderbilt. Went from being redshirted to that same year playing to then starting to some success. We beat Georgia at homecoming. I had a game-winning tackle against Northern Illinois. And we start the season off, get a pick against Alabama, and I'm benched against Notre Dame. Look back at that, and it created trauma, created struggle. But now any student that comes into my office, student or student athlete, I can relate. And I think that's the important part of people who worn the jersey. The relatability, the intentionality, and the connection. And I think what I saw from Brad, which is eventually what I learned at WashU, is it's important to know people by name and story. I remember running out the spring practice, snow on the ground, and before I hit those doors, I ran across Brad, and Brad say, it's going to be tough for a Florida kid out in that weather. The fact that he knew who I was, a senior associate who knew
who you
who
were,
I was.
knew where you came from, how it might affect you. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So for me, if I ever go on an interview and I'm thinking looking in the rearview mirror, and they're walking me from meeting to meeting, and the administration doesn't speak to student athletes, that's a bad sign. That doesn't correlate with my core values, right? I really want to be able to connect. It's interesting, really good coaches talk about touches, right? Making sure that when you come off the bench, you're touching. When you come off the court, you're touching. In practice, you're acknowledging, right? There's a great story about Dean Smith where if you got a pass, you give the sign and you point to the person that gave you the pass that ended up being an assist. There's a lot to be said about human connection, and really trying to get to know somebody before we get to the emergency. You can't.
So continue. Sorry, go ahead.
What I was just about to say is you can't build relationships in an emergency, And so being connected. And the challenges we have is that I think our greatest asset at times can be how we manage time. And the challenge we have is in managing that time, usually we don't think about ourselves. Because you're a servant leader, I'm a servant leader, but an important ingredient to being a servant leader is self-care.
You are giving me 5 to 100 nuggets of things to talk about here, and a piece that stands out is how much what we probably both experience as student athletes, and we're hearing some of what you experience as a student athlete really influences to this day that blueprint for success. And you're talking about the purpose, and I'm hearing the student athlete and the touch with the student athlete and the care for the student athlete as a part of that purpose. And then I'm also hearing I also have to care for myself, which I'm assuming, like I needed to as well, although we were much younger. Self-care mattered and always matters as a student athlete as well. And at the same time, you needed to know people cared for you. I remember finishing a race at Vanderbilt and sitting in a corner crying, and my coach coming up and saying, Jacqui, you're too hard on yourself. And I thought, why is he saying that? I ran a terrible race. Like, this was not a good performance. I should be hard on myself. And I deal with those same things now where, we're successful I think our team at UMass-Boston would look back on the last 3.5 years and say we've done so much, and I'm still seeing all that we can do, and still sitting back being that sort of person in the corner being really hard on myself that needs those people who can help remind me of our purpose, because we are living out our purpose, and also help me remember, like, I'm probably being too hard on myself at times, and I have to take care of myself better, with those high expectations, etc. So I'm curious, as I reflect back on that, I know being a student athlete taught me so many things about how to be successful, like you shared, and I know that that experience has helped me be the strong leader I am today. How has that changed for you, along the way? How has that time there maybe contributed to the blueprint for success, which I think we heard a bit about, but how has it changed, especially, we talk about, or you've talked about the value of winning, but it can't be the only thing we focus on. And then we're in this influx, in this moment in college athletics, where there's so much changing. It's constant. We can't just respond to the emergency. We have to have the touch points before it. And we all know that emergency is going to come, where we don't know that person yet, and we have to respond, right? And they're really, really tough issues that we face. How were you prepared to deal with that? And what maybe has changed about how you approach that success now?
Yeah, and that's a really great question. I'm gonna try to unpack it as best I can, but let me start with maybe a track reference, since you are maybe still a current track athlete.
I like
I hate to
track. I
say
watch it.
former.
My knees hurt now,
Hate to
so
say former. The thing that I realized, and I learned this during a pandemic, maybe more than I should have, is you can't sprint a marathon, right? There's something to be said about having a process, right? And as the older you get, the process and the journey sometimes is more enjoyable, teaches you more than the end destination. Now, I love when our teams compete. I love it when they get a chance and an opportunity to be in the arena, and then let's find out what their best looks like. Will they meet the moment, right? And then looking back at, okay, what we didn't do that we could have done, because we tried to be a mile wide and an inch deep, versus all politics are local. What's important to the WashU student athlete? And let's make sure we focus on that, because our biggest thing is, how do we develop? And also, how do we get young people to go beyond their aspirations? Which, when I think back selfishly and look in the mirror at what I experienced at Vanderbilt, there's pieces of that there. Now, I didn't have it all together, tied up in a nice bow as some of these student athletes that I meet. But the beauty of it is, it goes back to a SAC leader said to me in my second year. He's like, with all due respect, we know you can bring people in to come speak to us who are in the C-suite, but we would like to hear from students or alums who are less than 5 years out. And I was curious. I was like, to why? Because we want to know what their missteps were, because there's a lot to be learned from that. And at that moment, the light came on to say, I got to share my failures. To let them know that you can respond to failure. And it comes in a lot of different ways, And I thought this was interesting, because I sit down with no more than 6 students and student athletes for lunch twice a month. I try. And when they talk about, they get discouraged when they hear what other students are doing. And it was one that was
in
very
terms
old.
of the success of other students,
what other students are doing, internships and the vacations and all
like
that.
discouraged that they're not doing it, or they're not able to do it. Yes.
Correct. And all of those means we came back to the point of, you got to run your own race. And sometimes, and in some seasons of your life, you're not meant to sprint. There's a time to kind of go at a good pace, learn, develop, take 2 steps forward, take 3 steps back, understand what you missed, and really be able to start to accelerate. But if you get too caught up in, I got to play this game of perfection, you're going to miss the moment. You're going to miss the opportunity, right? How best do I learn how to make a layup in traffic It's not by watching other people. It's by the experience, and sometimes by missing, so I can perfect it to a point where I'm going to make more than I miss, right? As well as we talk about, what are your values? Because if you got real values, it's just like excellence. Remember, Brad used to say excellence is not part-time. It's who you are. It's the habits that you're learning and forming and developing and all that good stuff. So to answer your question, I'm still a work in progress. My hope is I'm learning more and being able to understand more, and living in that quote somebody told me is, when you've experienced a lot, then you kind of seen these movies before. It's just different characters. So now you can change the ending,
So this is so great, and really, to me, keeps going back to what you said at the beginning of this, which is that purpose, right?
Yeah.
Really knowing in your success blueprint what it boils down to, right? So when all the chips are on the table, all the emergencies are coming, all the things are changing, this is why I do what I do. This is why we do what we do. And as you're talking about your student athletes and them needing to hear a bit more about the failures or the things that you've overcome or people have overcome, a lot of that is how they find their purpose, how they really refine their values. And, I've had success myself, and, it took me almost 20 years to go back and get my doctorate. And every 3 or 4 years, I thought about it. I tried to approach it. I couldn't get there.
Right.
And it was really one of the hardest things that I did. And I was able to do it because of some of the things I didn't achieve. That I finally got to a point where I was like, this is something I really wanted to do. It's going to make me better. And I'm getting clearer and clearer about what matters to me. And in leadership, when you're faced with so many different things, you have to know what you value. We all have to know what matters. And we have to know why we're doing this, because that 10% that you're talking about can hit you in the face really hard some days and make you question why. And that why has to be the purpose. It has to be tied to those values. And a lot of that is really, as you said, along the way about the things you've overcome to make you understand what really matters. And so my last question to you is, why does it matter to you to lead?
I think I have a story to tell. My hope is that I went through what I went through to help others. And my whole motto has been build a bridge for people to come over. And we get to work in academia. And I think you and I agree with the fact that there's talent in every zip code, in every community. Access and opportunity is not equally distributed, right? And so we get these young people that want to aspire to do some great things. We got to make sure that they got that tool bag, because the wind's going to blow. And at the end of the day, if I can teach a young person how to handle hard better, we got a better chance. To everything you just brought up, the only thing I would add to it is mindset. At where we are now, mindset is a little bit more important than skill set, because we're in very demanding areas, a very demanding enterprise. The only common denominator is the person, right? You look at where some of our experiences. So the question is, have we really been intentional learning from those experiences? So when we face the next challenge, we've seen this movie before. It's just different characters, and we can change the ending.
It's great. This has been a great conversation. I really wanted my last question to be if I'm your favorite Vanderbilt alum, but I thought we'd end on...
I always say that when I'm in front of an alum. You're my favorite.
We can end on leadership. No, we can end on that. Okay, I am a favorite. I do like that. I like to end that way. Thank you, Anthony, for joining us on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
It's awesome to be with phenomenal people and people that's in the business for the right reasons. So I'm glad to share this space with you, and I'm going to be cheering your career on from the sideline.
Thank you. Same with me, of course. And once again, this is Dr. Jacqui Schuman, Vice Chancellor and Director of Athletics and Recreation at UMASS-Boston. And I've been here today with Anthony Azama, Associate Vice Chancellor and Director of Athletics at WashU.